Hi, I built this LinkedIn Analytics dashboard for a show and tell in the marketing Tableau user group meeting recently. This session will take you through how to build along a dashboard by downloading your own dataset from LinkedIn. A quick overview of how the dashboard can be used. We have a few selections right off the top where you can select the date granularity of these trend charts. You can also zoom in on the current month, the past 3 months, or the last 1 year worth of data. When you go to your LinkedIn, under Analytics, Show All Analytics, you can now download the data using this export button. Request using the instructions over here. I have put the URL to this instruction page, so when you get to it, you can download your own data. And there is API support as well. LinkedIn sent the data as flat files in my email. I downloaded the attachment, took a few files. First page has the analytics information. The second tab shows the activities that I have done. I can choose the date granularity, months. I can also choose activities like what are my messages over months by weekdays for a given year or the last 5 years. I can choose and I can interact with my data. The year of 2019. Can you imagine why I have so many reactions, so many messages, and so many reposts all stacked up in November and December? You guessed it, that was the Tableau conference time. We saw how we can download the analytics. We looked at the activity sheet, how we can download all the activity data from LinkedIn. Before we get into how I designed this dashboard, let's talk about me. I'm Ojo. I'm a Tableau fam, part of the data fam since 2012, 2013. Tableau's my passion. I love to build and share what I learned. I have a calendar table. That's my first data source. My second data source is the LinkedIn Analytics. The export analytics instruction should take you to the set of instructions and how it can be done as we discussed before. And then the third data set are this flat files which LinkedIn sends you in an email and I downloaded. These have the reactions, messages, and the shares, comments tied with the date field from my calendar table. Once my relationship is set, I bring my comments into the data set as well. Similarly, messages, reactions, and shares, these are all flat files that were sent from LinkedIn upon my request following the instructions. Once my data is ready, I can now start the build process. This KPI sheet has the measure names. I filtered the measure names to show me impressions, engagements, and new followers. I'm keeping the measure values bold 18 and then the measure names a little smaller at 10. The color palette I've used matches with the LinkedIn logo color palette. I want the other sheet that I have here is the trend chart. The x-axis is dynamic based on the granularity. How did I do this? I have my date granularity as a parameter and it has three values: days, weeks, and months. It's a list. It's a string type parameter. Now, I use this parameter in a calculated field From my calendar date field, I went ahead and I created a day's custom date field, name days, details days, date value. I created a months as a custom months field, and I created a weeks, a custom week number field. These are custom dates. How did I do it? Right click on the date field, create custom date. And then you can go ahead and choose whether it's going to be days, whether it's going to be weeks, or whether it's going to be a month. Once I had those fields, I then went ahead and created this calculated field based on the parameter we just saw. Case, date granularity parameter. When days, use the newly created custom days field. When weeks, custom date weeks field. When months, custom date months field. Then I drag these dates onto the columns. Right click, drag, continuous dates. Measure names, filtered down to engagements, impressions, and new followers onto the rows, and measure values onto the rows as well. I used a lighter shade of the brand to shade instead of the default gray. I used the lighter shade to color the bands. I also made sure that my workbook formatting uses the same shade of blue as the LinkedIn logo. This text box has the instructions, and this one has the URLs. For each of my, this is a dynamic field. This URL is a dynamic field, and the values depend on the choices I make on this trend chart. If I were to select engagements on a particular date, it would show me that day engagements. If I were to select the impressions chart on a particular day, it would show me the impressions for posts made on that day. How did I do this? Dashboard actions. There is a filter action that gets fired when I select my analytics trend chart, and it actions on the top post, this little box that we saw below. And when I unselect it, it holds on to the filtered values. If I said exclude all values, then when I click away, that box would go away. Information is coming dynamically from the top engagements and the top impressions data set we saw earlier. How did I do this? I have a dates field, which is dynamic as you saw earlier. The calculation is dynamic based on the granularity chosen. And the URL is also dynamic based on which chart I'm choosing. If it's an impression, it's going to give a URL for an impression of that day. If it's on the engagements chart, line chart, it's going to give URLs of the top engagements on that day. How did I achieve it? Select on engagements, my value changes to engagements. When I click on impressions, my analytics parameter changes to impressions. And all of this is happening thanks to update metrics parameter, which goes like, which is as soon as I select anything on the analytics trend, update the analytics parameter with the value in the measure name. Case, when my analytics parameter, which is dynamically changing thanks to the parameter action, when it is engagements, then which is post URL, this one. When it is impressions, give me the URL from my top 50 impressions table, which is this one. And that is the driver for this dynamic value. Now, the other action that I've written here is when I click on this number 31, it takes me to my actual LinkedIn post. This URL action. Hyperlink, add action, go to URL, URL action that I've used, hyperlink to top post. When I select this value on the top post sheet, open a new tab if no tab is existing, pass the calculated field URL, which dynamically changes, pass that value, that post using that URL action. Hope this is making sense. That's all that is there to this dashboard. KPIs, we looked into it, how to build this dynamic trend chart where the x axis dates is dynamic based on parameter calculation, box with URLs. It has parameter actions, action filter, and URL action. To the next sheet. This uses the data from the CSV files that LinkedIn sent as an email attachment, and I brought into my data set. This is a marginal histogram. I brought the months from the dates field into columns and the activity value into the rows. This is a dynamic. Select an activity is a parameter. It's a list type, it's a string list parameter with messages, reposts, and reactions. This activity values calculated field does just that. Case activity parameter when messages, show me the count of messages CSV. When it's repost, count of shares. And when it's reactions, give me the count of reactions. Then on this marginal histogram has been dragged into the rows where the columns are the months. Similar to this, on the weekday marginal histogram, where weekday is dragged onto the rows, that calculated field is now dragged onto the columns. Let me hide this so that I don't have to double duplicate the headers for the weeks. And this one, dragged weekdays to the rows, the months of the dates to the columns, chose a square, and I colored it by the activity values, which again is that dynamic field that we looked at. So what's happening here behind the scenes is I've used a color palette, which I have custom created based on the LinkedIn logo color, and it's filling it up. Here are, this is a quick filter on the years. These are the parameters we looked at earlier. And my date granularity, as I hover over a box, it lights up the month and the weekday. This I've achieved using highlight action, highlight months, highlights the month. Day, similarly, is the highlight action that highlights the weekday. There is a trend chart where the dates, the dynamically calculated dates, are the on the columns shelf, and then the activity value, which is again dynamic based on the activity chosen, is on the rows shelf. And that's all there is to this build. Hope you found this helpful. Thank you.